In the last lecture, we created an auth interceptor, and using that auth interceptor, we were attaching the access token of a logged in user to each request which we are sending from our Angular application. So if I go to VS Code, here we created this auth interceptor, and what this auth interceptor is doing is, using this intercept method, we are adding the access token of the logged in user to each request which we are sending from our Angular application. Now, if this token is not present, that means no user is logged in. In that case, we are not modifying the request. We are not adding any auth query parameter to the request. But if the token is present, that means there is a logged in user, and in that case, we are creating a clone of the original request, and to that we are adding the auth query parameter, and to that we are assigning the access token of the logged in user, and then we are returning that modified request from within this interceptor. Now what it has done is it has introduced some bugs in our application during login and logout. So let me show you that. Let's go to our application and let me reload the page here. Okay, now currently if you see, there is no user logged in. So what I'll do is I'll click on this login link. It will take us to the login page, and here I'll try to log in john@gmail.com, and for John the password is test1234. When I click on this login button, you will notice that we have this error: an unknown error has occurred. Now this error is coming from the auth service. So here we have auth service file, and in there we have a method called getErrorMessage. And in that getErrorMessage, we are creating a message property which is assigned with a string value, an error message which says an unknown error has occurred. And this is the error we saw on our UI when we were trying to log in a user. So from where we are throwing this error? We are throwing this error from within this if statement. So here we are going to check what is the actual error which is happening. And for that, I'm going to write a console.log statement. And in here, we are going to log error response. Let's save the changes. Let's go to our application. And here, let me open developer console. And I'll move it to, let's go to console. This should be fine. And let me clear everything here. And here, let's try to log in John again. So for that, I'll say john@gmail.com. And for John, again, I'll provide his password, which is test1234. When I log in here, you can see that error message, an unknown error has occurred. And you'll also see that there is something logged from auth service.ts file. And if you see, it is an error which is of type error. And what does this error says? It says that cannot read properties of null. Now, why do we have this error? We have this error because, let's go back to VS Code. So inside this interceptor, basically inside this auth interceptor, what we are doing is we are trying to get the value of the access token of the logged in user. But initially, when the application is loading for the first time and when no user is logged in, at that time, the user will be null. Now, when we are selecting this get access token, if I go to auth selector, what we are returning? We are returning user.access token. But initially, the user will be null, right? Because no user is logged in. And on that null, we are trying to access a property. And because of that, we are getting this type error, cannot read properties of null. So to fix this, what we need to do is, here we just need to use a optional chaining operator. And what it will do is, if user is null, on that, it will not try to access this access token property. Okay, only if user object is present, then only on that it will try to access the access token property. And with this, if I save the changes and if we go to our application, and now if I try to log in john@gmail.com, and let's specify the password for that. And when I click on login, you will see that now John is logged in. So that issue is resolved. Now we also have a problem with the logout. So here when I click on this logout button, you will see first it logs out and then it logs in again. It logs in automatically. Again, if I click on logout, we will be redirected to the login page, and immediately we are redirected to the home page and the user is logged in. Now, why do we have this problem? We have this problem because again, it is due to this auth interceptor. So here we are trying to get the access token. For that, we are using this select method. So whenever the access token will change, basically whenever this user state will change, on that user state we are trying to access the access token. So whenever this user state will change, this interceptor will be notified about that, because here we are subscribing to it, to this access token, right? So when we are logging out a user, for the logout we are handling it using a reducer and using an effect. So if I go to reducer, here we have this reducer which is handling this logout action. And then if I go to effect, there also we have an effect which is handling the logout action. So as we have learned before, if the same action is being handled by a reducer as well as the effect, then first the reducer function will run and it will run synchronously, and then the effect will run and it will run asynchronously. So here it is possible that when we are logging out the user, the reducer function is running and it is setting the user state to null. Okay. And when the user state is getting set to null, this interceptor is being notified about that. And when the interceptor is being notified about that, it is trying to execute this callback function again. So here what we need to do is, inside this pipe, I'm going to use another operator called take. And here I'm going to tell that if multiple values are being emitted by this observable, just take the first emitted value. And to use this take operator, we also need to import it from RxJS. Okay, so we are telling that if this observable is emitting multiple values, only take the first emitted value. And on that emitted value, we are going to call this exhaust map to execute this callback function. Okay, and this should solve the logout issue also. So now if I log out, the user is logged out properly. Let me try to log in mark@gmail.com, and for him, let's say password is test1234. Actually, the password for Mark also is 1234. If I log in this user, the user is logged in. Okay, and if I click on this logout button, the user is logged out. So now both login and logout bugs are fixed. In the next lecture, what we are going to do is, since this courses page should be accessible only by a logged in user, because if you see, when a user is not logged in and when he is trying to access this courses page, it is throwing an error and it is not showing all the courses. But if a user is logged in and then he try to access the page, he can see all the courses. So what we are going to do is, we are going to create a canActivate route card in our next lecture, and we will make sure that this courses page is only accessible by a logged in user. If a non-logged in user tries to access this page, we will redirect him to the home page. Let's see how we can do that in our next lecture. This is all from this lecture. If you have any questions from this lecture, then feel free to ask it. Thank you for listening and have a great day.